Hello and welcome, wherever you are in the world. This is JC F1. It's just been the Brazil Grand Prix. What a banger! What a real, sort of unexpected banger. I really thought looking at the weather report, seeing that it was going to be a dry race, and seeing the McLaren pace, I thought that it was going to be a really boring race, to be honest. I was wrong. Thank goodness I was wrong. What an incredible race we got. Tons of overtaking, way more than I expected. Different tire strategies, incident safety cars. What more can you ask for? So there were some interesting points in the data though that I'd like to show you. And I think that you'll find it pretty interesting too. So let's jump in. Should Max have won the race? I think there's a lot to consider. Firstly, and most importantly, I think, we have to remember that Max's pace during the race was not an indicator of where the Red Bull is right now. In fact, I think Yuki Tsunoda's car is maybe a better indicator of where the Red Bull was this weekend. Of course, remember that Yuki Tsunoda was driving the car that put Max in a P16 quali that had him out in Q1. The fact that they could change their car after Parc Ferme, taking that engine penalty, getting a brand new power unit this late in the season, that's not nothing. That's a pretty significant advantage for the race. With that said though, Max was absolutely flying. I think even beyond what we could have expected from Max, given his Parc Ferme changes and so on, I think that regardless of that, Max would have likely been the fastest person on the track in any case. Would he have been so fast that from P16 he would have made it to where he ended up finishing without the new power unit, without the Parc Ferme changes? No, I don't think so. Absolutely not. If we look at the data, I think it's pretty staggering actually how much quicker Max was than Norris. If you have a look, you can see that his median lap was about 4/10 quicker actually than Norris across the course of the race. And something else to remember is that Max had that puncture and he had to come in for a pit off of the hard tires on lap 8. Now you might think, of course, that the puncture was unlucky, and it was, but I don't think it was that unlucky. I think it may have been a blessing actually. If we look at the other cars who started on the hards, notably both Astons as well as Tsunoda, these are cars who started on the hards and they stuck to the hards a little bit longer. I think it became clear that the hards were just a terrible tire. No teams had real data on the hards going into the race weekend. They were not used during the sprint. And as a result of that, I think Red Bull was really taking a gamble that maybe the hard tire would yield something impressive for them. Max obviously had to get rid of the hards pretty quickly, getting a puncture following the VSC restart. And I think that was actually kind of lucky, because had he stayed on the hards, I think that his pace would have been nowhere near as impressive as it was on the far superior mediums. And I don't think he would have made as much of an impression. Don't get me wrong, I think he still would have had a pretty stellar race, but nothing compared to this, which was an absolute hero drive. So yeah, should Max have won the race? I'm not really sure. I think it's safe to say that Max was probably on pace for P2. I was really optimistic that Max was going to be able to get past Antonelli when we saw how quickly he caught up and passed Russell. And as you can see from the box plot as well, Russell and Antonelli had super similar pace. But once he did get into Antonelli's dirty air with the tires that had been aged for quite some time at that stage, I think it was pretty clear that there was never going to be a move. Of course, it is Max, so you never know if there's going to be some crazy lunge down the inside or whatever. But that was I think it was pretty clear immediately. Once he came within DRS range, the impression that he made on Antonelli was just not what I expected immediately. And so I think Max ended up pretty much maximizing his performance with the tire strategy that he had available. Could he have stayed on those mediums, the second set of mediums? For me, that's a really interesting question. I would have loved to see what he could have done had he, instead of hopping onto the soft tires, stayed on the mediums. Because we know that Norris was committed to a second stop. That would have meant Norris would have been behind Max by not a nothing margin. It would have taken him quite a few laps to catch up to Max. And then, of course, that gives Max the opportunity to defend that position, which we know Max is very good at making his car as wide as possible. Hindsight is 2020. I would have loved to see what Max could have done. Now, of course, I think if he had stayed on those mediums, he would have had to run almost 40 laps on the second pair of mediums, which is not ideal. But I think that he may have been able to at least secure that P2 had he gone for that strategy instead. With that said, though, it's clear that his softs were really dead by the end of the race, which shows the tire degradation was very high. I mean, of course, we saw almost every car doing a two-stopper, so that does show that degradation was high. But he did thrash his softs at the end. He did drive very aggressively trying to make up that time. He said himself on the radio, we have nothing to lose. So there's a lot to think about, a lot of data. I do think there's a world in which P2 was realistic for Max. I don't necessarily think that he was ever on for a victory, despite how good the pace was. I don't think there's any combination of pitting on certain laps or whatever the case that could have guaranteed him a win or could have given him a very strong shot at the win. But regardless, a hero's drive. An incredible, incredible drive. Championship back off. Championship back off. I have been so optimistic that we were going to go into Abu Dhabi with a 2-horse, if not a 3-horse race. And you can forgive me for thinking that because it's been a pretty wild season. Oscar led the championship for such an incredible amount of time. He seemed really insurmountable. But the momentum has shifted so strongly towards Lando. And I think that's clear in the data. So if you have a look at Monza, Monza was actually the last time that we can say Piastri was really close to Norris. Now, I know that that doesn't really make any sense because, of course, we have a 2.1 second gap in Monza and a 2.1 second gap in Singapore. But to be honest, in Singapore, Norris just felt a little bit more in control for the majority of that race, I would say. And if you look at the median times, they actually have pretty consistent medians throughout both of those races. But really in the last 3 races, Piastri has fallen off considerably. You can see in the data that there is a huge gap that's opened up between the two of them. Now, of course, Brazil, you look at that gap, 15.7 seconds at the end. It's smaller than the past 2 races, considerably smaller than 42 seconds last time, smaller than 21.7 in the USA. For me, the finishing gap is not even really the story. It's the race pace. There was an interview at one point with Andrea Stella. He was asked about what was going on with Oscar and whether there was a certain kind of corner that Oscar was struggling with a new car and whatever. And Andrea Stella said that Oscar was losing just a little bit of time every corner, which is essentially a way of saying that Oscar's race pace is just not where Lando's is. Oscar is not the same driver that we saw during that absolutely dominant streak in the middle of the season. And I think that's really sad because I was rooting for Oscar personally. I really, really did want him to be the new champion. And if not him, then maybe Max. But it's true that Norris kind of out of nowhere has just put in a championship-worthy string of performances. It's just true. And I know that the public opinion kind of doesn't like Norris very much. I mean, all the stuff with papaya rules and, the way McLaren, the way we go racing, it can get annoying. It annoys me too. And as with a lot of people, Norris would not be my first choice. Norris wouldn't be in my top 5 for who I would want to win this championship. But you can't say that he doesn't deserve it. He's in the fastest car. That is the way that this sport works. The guy in the fastest car has the best opportunity. But when you have that opportunity, it's your responsibility not to squander that opportunity. Norris has a reputation for bottling races, bottling strategies, bottling starts. And this obviously comes from last year when he was kind of, barely in the hunt for a championship. And it comes from the earlier part of this year when Oscar was beating him so convincingly. It comes from Canada when he made that overtake attempt and ended up DNFing. And to be honest, he's had a pretty stellar turnaround. I can't remember the last time that Norris had a really terrible performance. It's been quite some time. He's been consistently there. He's in the lead of the championship now. He seems to be managing the pressure well. And he said in the interview after the race, when he was asked about this turnaround in form and how he's managing it, he said, just cut out the noise. Don't listen to what people are saying about you. And to be honest, that's exactly what he needed to do. I think he probably saw a sports psychologist or something like that and spoke through these issues. It was very clear last year that pressure was a big thing getting to him. People, as soon as he was stereotyped as the guy who bottled races, I'm sure he was seeing the memes, he was seeing the videos, and I think that really got into his head. This year, he seems to have just tuned that all out, and he's performing exceptionally well. He seems really confident. I know he did say something about how he was concerned about Max's pace, but Max is so far behind at this point. We only have 3 races left. I saw that Max is almost 2 full race wins behind Lando in the championship now, which means that even barring an absolute miracle, I think Max is really out of this championship fight. And McLaren also, where we thought in the late stage of the European leg that McLaren's pace had fallen off, they seem to have found it again. They seem to be the fastest car again. And these next couple tracks, Vegas, Qatar, these are McLaren tracks. These are tracks that McLaren is good at, Abu Dhabi too. So yes, I think that unfortunately, championship back off, I reckon. I hope I'm wrong. I really do hope I'm wrong. I mean, of course, not to wish anything bad on Lando, but a Lando DNF in the next race would really open this up again. And it would give us a lot to talk about, I'm sure. But I think that Lando seems confident. The car seems stable. The tracks seem favorable. I think Lando's going to cruise. I doubt that Oscar will finish ahead of Lando again this season. I think Lando will probably win most of, if not all of the remaining races for the rest of the year. And Lando Norris will be the world champion in 2025. That will be true. That will be the case. And we'll see whether McLaren can roll this momentum into next year, because they've had a pretty stellar car for about 18, 19 months now. So, yeah, congrats to him. He deserves it. I think that the mark of a champion, of course, it's about your driving. Of course, it's about doing well. But I think it's also about the mental game. And there were discussions, so many discussions, about how Lando was just not mentally the guy to be able. He didn't have that championship mindset. I mean, we all remember the Drive to Survive Will Buxton comment. I don't think that's true anymore. I think that Lando has worked past those issues. I think he's grown and matured into someone who does have that championship mindset. Of course, it's easy to say when he's out in front and he's not being challenged by another car. It would be interesting to see how his mentality would be questioned if Oscar was there, if Max was there, fighting every race for that lead. But I think right now he's cool, calm, collected, and I think he'll comfortably win this championship. Should Russell be worried? This race was another incredible performance by Kimi Antonelli. I have been so impressed by Kimi Antonelli over the past few races, and really over the entire year. I know he had that just terrible run of form in the European races, but the pace is there. Like, I think I've heard a lot of talk about analyzing a rookie, and if you have a rookie who's incredibly peaky, a rookie who does seriously well in one race, then poor in another race, that is actually much better than a rookie who is kind of consistently mid, and a rookie who doesn't have these huge breakout performances. Because you can kind of polish out inconsistency, but it's very difficult to cultivate pace. And I think Kimi Antonelli has shown that he has pace. With that said, he's now finished ahead of Russell 2 races in a row, 3 if you include the sprint as well. He's done exceptionally well, just stellar performances. He's showing not only that he can get up there, but that he is comfortable up there. He's comfortable in those front-running positions. And I think that Antonelli winning a race is not something that's too far away. If Mercedes can deliver a car in Vegas, I expect Mercedes to be very fast in Vegas. It's a cooler track, long straights, that kind of thing. Antonelli win is on the cards. It really is on the cards. His qualifying has been incredibly strong. With that said, Russell has had a stellar year. Russell has had maybe his best year of his career, just an extraordinary year. And if you have a look at the box plots, you'll see that yes, Antonelli is finishing ahead of Russell, but the gaps are narrow. I mean, really, in terms of race pace, the gaps are almost non-existent. These two guys are going punch for punch. Now, that's extremely impressive for Antonelli, who is a rookie, to be able to match with Russell, who I really rate. I think Russell is an extraordinary driver. I think that it shows Antonelli has a really great amount of promise. Does Russell need to be worried? I don't think so. I think that it will take Antonelli another year or two to iron out his inconsistency issues. I think that should Mercedes, as the rumors are going, have the absolute car to beat in 2026, I think Russell doesn't have to worry too much about Antonelli being a real title contender. With that said, though, looking towards the end of 26, looking towards 27, once Antonelli really settles in as a more experienced racer, I think he's a star of the future. I really do. I think Antonelli will win many races. I think Antonelli, given the right car, I think is a championship contender for years to come. And I would love to see that. I really would love to see that. If we assume that this new batch, this new generation of drivers, all the guys who are rookies right now, if we assume that they're going to be fighting against each other in 5-6 years for titles, Antonelli in the Mercedes, Bayman in the Ferrari at that stage, Bortoleto maybe also in the Ferrari, and then Hadjar, who I think is excellent also in the Red Bull. I think Formula One's in good hands for the remainder of the decade. I think we really are going to see some incredible performances and incredible stories coming out of these guys. And Antonelli, I think, might be a slight cut above the rest. So yeah, given the right car, maybe not next year, but I think looking ahead, Antonelli really is someone to watch. And yeah, that doesn't mean George has to be worried, at least not for now, but he's a star of the future, that's for sure. Should Tsunoda lose his seat? Should Tsunoda lose his seat is a question that I'm not going to answer today, because that is the topic of my next video. So please subscribe to the channel. This is a brand new channel. This is my first video. Thank you for watching it. I am an enormous F1 fan. I'm kind of a spreadsheet nerd. This is the kind of thing that I'm really into. I love looking at the data. I love talking about the data. I'd love some feedback. Please, if you have feedback on the channel, I'm just starting. I'm kind of still figuring out what my trajectory is going to be. So if you have anything you want to see more of, anything that you think could have been different or better, please let me know. I am inspired by the greats, the legends of the space. Tom McCluskey, P1 with Matt and Tommy, Law VS. These are guys I really look up to. I want to be up there. I want to be with them. And hopefully this is the start of that. Hopefully this is the start of something excellent. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.